Lauri Markkanen gets paid. Let's talk about it. It's the Hoopsner Show. All right, guys. Lauri Markkanen gets the bag, as they say. He has signed a 5-year, $238 million contract to stay with the Utah Jazz. 5 years, no player option, descending cap hit. Really interesting, big-time contract for Lauri. Congratulations to Lauri Markkanen on getting paid and coming to Utah, working his way up, becoming an all-star, earning that money. Just a really fun story, just overall. Whatever you think about the signing and whatever you think about the Jazz future and everything that's going on with the Utah Jazz right now, you have to be happy for Lauri Markkanen, and just a cool story about a player who struggled a little bit to start his career, had some injuries and things like that, kind of underwhelmed, and then really figured it out with the Utah Jazz and gets rewarded for his hard work and becomes the highest paid Jazz player in team history. So pretty amazing. All right, so let's just talk about it. Let's talk about kind of the reasons to be happy about it, some things to think about, and some potential things that might happen because of this contract. So let's just get into it. So first, you've just got to be happy for Lauri Markkanen. Like I said, he finds stability with the Utah Jazz, something that he has wanted when you consider all the trades that have happened, going from Chicago to Cleveland and then to Utah. Lauri Markkanen has a family. He has a wife and kids, and I'm sure one of the things he's really wanted is just some stability in his life. If you're a person with kids and with a family, you understand that right now it's August. Back to school is happening right now, and there's a human element to this where you've got to be happy for Markkanen because he has a chance to let his kids go to school. His family can just figure things out. It's a big part of life in the NBA for players who have families. This type of thing is a big deal, and so getting traded, uprooting kids, is really just a hard thing for these players when they have families. So you got to be happy for Markkanen. I'm sure, well, not sure, I know for a fact that he probably did some of these things for that reason. I mean, he makes sure that he signs on August 7th, today, instead of yesterday. We've talked about this ad nauseum. You've probably read about it. But if he had signed this contract yesterday, then he would have been trade eligible this upcoming season at trade deadline. By signing it today, you cannot trade a player until 6 months after the contract is signed. Trade deadline being the 6th. In 6 months, that means he cannot be traded this season for a team, at least I believe, that could use him in the playoffs. So there's just not a reason for them to trade them. And I could be not completely correct on that, but I know that he's just not really trade eligible because of him signing it today. So Lauri Markkanen, by signing it today, creates that stability in his life, at least for the next year. You know, up until next offseason, then the Jazz can decide if they do something else. But for the meantime, he gets that stability, and he's got to be happy. The other thing you've got to be happy about if you're a Jazz fan is that Lauri Markkanen likes Utah. He wanted to be here. Now, if you're like me with some of these things, and you've been doing this for a while and covered all this, you know that I can be a little cynical. There's a lot of cynicism out there about sports, and it's rightfully deserved. You know, I think a lot of the time, these players will make these contract signings because they get the most money possible. They go where the money is. In reality, that's typically what the deciding factor for most contracts is. Now, if you're one of the top players in the league, if you're LeBron James, you get to choose where you go. And that's why LeBron goes to LA and things like that. But not every player gets that chance to just choose where they're going. You know, not everyone's prime Kevin Durant or Giannis or anyone like that. If you're Lauri Markkanen, you're going to try to get the most money possible, and that was with Utah. And you get it as soon as possible. So Lauri Markkanen gets this contract now. He gets it before he gets any sort of serious injury that might happen, because he has had some injury concerns in the past. So he's locked in, big-time contract, 5 years, no player option, and it's a descending cap hit. So really interesting. But before we talk about the cap and all that stuff, you just got to be, cognizant of that Lauri Markkanen likes Utah. He likes his family being here. And the other thing that he has mentioned is that he likes the coaching staff. He mentions Will Hardy. Will Hardy got the best out of Lauri Markkanen. He didn't get these things in Cleveland. He didn't get this type of production in Chicago. He comes to Utah and he gets that. So obviously Lauri Markkanen likes the way things are here in Utah, which is a very good sign for Jazz fans. If you are having questions about Will Hardy, well, if you have questions about Will Hardy, you know who doesn't? Lauri Markkanen, because he's signing here 5 years. No player option. It's 5 years, that's it. And that right there tells you a lot, that he is locked in for 5 years. He wants to be here. He wants to play for Will Hardy. He appreciates the organization. He mentioned Ryan Smith in his video, and I think he'd mentioned Danny Ainge as well. You should go watch those videos and whatnot. But he is locked in, loves Utah, loves the coaching staff, and he loves the money. Okay, let's be honest. If any of you want, you know what, I wouldn't mind having $238 million. Is anyone else going to turn that down over 5 years? Are you serial? Are you serial? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. We'll just say that. All right? You know what? You make $238 million, you are supersizing that value meal. All right? Whenever you want. Whenever you want, okay? So there's a lot of reasons why he did it. Hopefully that makes sense, and if you're a Jazz fan, you just got to be happy, because what's the thing that Jazz fans talk about so much? The casual fan is like, oh, they're just going to leave. They're just going to leave. Well, guess what? Lauri likes Utah, and I know I've talked about the money aspect, but we have multiple examples of players leaving Utah that regretted it. Darren Williams, multiple times there were reports and stories from Darren Williams talking about it, that he regretted leaving Utah. It was a mistake. He loves being here. Darren Williams has a house in Holiday. His kids live here for part of the year. He splits time between Dallas and then he has his house in Holiday. Darren Williams loves it here. That's why you see him very often. The other one, Gordon Hayward. There were those reports that he immediately regretted leaving Utah. And I'm not talking about the injury. He just did not enjoy his time post-Jazz, and now he's retired. Post-Utah, things did not go well. So multiple players have shown that when you come to Utah or you get drafted by Utah, yes, there's stigmas here. We know what it's all about. There's a lot of white people here in Utah. It's just a fact. And there's just some stigmas about the predominant religion here in Utah. But when people actually come here and live here and become a part of the community and the environment, the mountains and the seasons here are nice. Myself having lived in multiple parts of the country, this is a nice place to live, in terms of weather and things like that. Not super overcrowded. The traffic isn't as bad as other places. There's just lots of nice things to like about Utah. It's a pretty place. It's nice to live. Players like it. If you come here, you may like it. Now, is Utah, LA, or New York, or Miami, or Houston, or any of these places that a lot of players like to go? No, it's not. Utah is never going to be one of those kinds of places. But there are certainly a lot of markets out there not as good as Utah. I can tell you that right now. I mean, when I lived in North Carolina, they don't even know they have a pro basketball team in North Carolina. They don't even know. I used to try to talk to people when I lived about there about the Bobcats at the time. And they're like, who are the Bobcats? I'm going to go watch North Carolina and Duke. Utah is a rabid fan base. They love this team. They embrace these players, and the players notice that. The players read SLC Dunk. They read the Tribune. They read Deseret News. They read all this stuff. I don't know if they've watched this channel. If you're watching this channel right now, Lauri, you're probably not a big fan of it because you've seen all my trade rumor videos. but the thing is the fan base here loves the Jazz. They love Lauri Markkanen, and they're going to support him. It's a nice place to be if you're an NBA player. There's a lot to like. Is it certain other places? No, but there's a lot to like. And Lauri Markkanen likes Utah, and that's great. And I know I've kind of mocked that on Twitter. Don't be mean to me. I just block people like Rudy Gobert now. But it is something to remember that, this is a player that came to Utah and likes it and wanted to be here. He was not wanting them to trade him. There was no trade thing at all. Lauri Markkanen multiple times had to say, I want to stay in Utah. Some of that is negotiation to get the contract and things like that, but got to be happy. All right. We've got to talk about a few other things with this contract and kind of what has been happening and what's going to happen now. So, like I said, this is a 5-year contract, $238 million, big time money. Congrats to Lauri Markkanen. He's supersizing that value meal. What's interesting about this contract, is it actually descends. So it goes up $18 million this year. He will make $42 million in 2024 and 2025, but it actually descends. This comes from Ken Clayton, who was on the podcast, friend of the Hoops Nerd show. Ken Clayton mentions that in 2024, 2025, it's a 30% hit of the cap. So I believe that's the max amount they could give him. They gave him a max amount in 2025, 2026, 30%. I may have to get Ken on here to say if this is a pure max, but guess what? In 2026, 2027, it goes down to 27%. In 2027, 28, it goes down to 26, and 2020, 26.6, and then in 2028 to 29, 26% even. So it's actually dips by 4% in those years, and as the money goes up, that's interesting. What that does is it means that it gives the Jazz more cap room in those years. It's interesting that it's a max over the next 2 seasons, so we could put our tinfoil hats on and ask some questions. What does that mean? Why are they only maxing him those 2, and then the following years it drops in cap? Does that mean, it makes it a little more tradable at the very least, but it also means that the Jazz will have cap space to sign a player. So, for example, 2024-25, that's this upcoming season, it's 30% of the max. They gave him as much as they could. And then they did the same thing for 25-26, that's 30%, but then it starts to descend. So Utah at that point, after those first 2 seasons, I think they're going to try to bottom out. We're going to talk about a little bit about that. Is that even possible? But I think Lauri Markkanen, because he's locked into Utah for 5 years, the Jazz can do whatever they want. And I've even had to tell myself that. And a lot of you tell me on Twitter, you tell me, hey, James, you're crazy. Shut up. And then I hit the block button. But then I think about what you said, and then I regret blocking. Sometimes. Most times, no. But anyways, you've got to remember that it's for the 2 years, it's 30%, but because it's a 5-year max, no player option on the final year, by the way, the Jazz can do whatever they want. Right? For 2 years. Let's say the Jazz just tell Lauri Markkanen, hey, would you like to have $42 million and go camping all season? What are your thoughts on getting a season pass to Lagoon or to to Hogle Zoo and to Tracy Aviary and to the Aquatic Center with that weird statue over there? On game days, Lauri, make sure you take the fam. We'll let the young guys play. You go over there, and then guess what? We're going to go for capture the flag time, baby. That's what's going to happen. And I think that there's an element of that's going to happen with Lauri Markkanen, that he's going to be probably resting some games this season. I think this season, that's the thing, is that a 5-year contract, they can do whatever they want. So if they want to rest Markkanen, that's what they're going to do. And that was one thing that was actually bugging me up to this contract signing. We had heard multiple things last season from a lot of reporters who are kind of close to the team, which they're close to the team, and I respect that a lot, and you get a flavor of what the players are thinking. But, I talked with Andy Larson on this podcast, friend of the pod, Andy Larson, who talked about how Lauri Markkanen wasn't a big fan of what happened last year, where the Jazz were competing. Then at trade deadline, they just tanked hard to try to get a better pick in the draft. Things didn't work out how we wanted because the Jazz drop in the lottery. But Lauri didn't like that. And in my opinion, I was like, so what? That's what the Jazz have to do. What's best for the Jazz? The Jazz are not out here just to make Lauri Markkanen happy. Sorry. That's just how it goes. Lauri Markkanen, this is the best of both worlds. Lauri Markkanen is now happy. He gets paid lots and lots of money. I don't know what the exchange rate is with Finland, but I'm guessing it's pretty decent. But then also Utah gets to do what they want. And I think it's interesting. We saw a tweet from Woj talking about this, where Lauri Markkanen talks about how he believes in this team. He loves how they believed in him, and he believes in the future of this team and building this team. So maybe Lauri Markkanen knows what the Jazz are going to do. All signs are pointing to the Jazz not winning a lot of games next year. And that is the question I think a lot of fans like me have, is what is next year going to be like? It's why I was okay if the Jazz had made a Lauri Markkanen trade, because I think the biggest thing for this Utah Jazz team to do is they have to find that centerpiece player. Lauri Markkanen is a really good player. He is an all-star caliber player. He's made the all-star team. He is not the number one guy on a championship team, and that's what the Jazz have said they want to do. They've said they want to go big game hunting. They say championship is the goal. Well, if Lauri Markkanen is your best player, you are not going to win a championship. That's just facts. The question is, how do you build around this team with Lauri Markkanen on it and win a title? Because if Lauri Markkanen is your second best player, then I think you can win a title. But that player has to be an MVP caliber guy. It's just a fact. If you want to win a championship, you have to have either the MVP or an MVP caliber guy. Go look at all the titles that have been won. You know, whether it's Giannis, LeBron, Kawhi Leonard, I guess you could talk about the Boston Celtics, but even Jason Tatum is a top 5 player at times, maybe like top 7 this last season. You know, you need a player that's at least top 5 to 7 to win a title. And Lauri Markkanen is not that. Now, you could argue at times he's been a top 15 to top 20 caliber player, and that's great. If that's your second option, you can win a title. But the question is, how do you get that number one guy? And with the way the CBA is, the way with contracts are, you basically have 2 max players. And then if you're a good team builder, like the Jazz have proven to be honest, filling those other spots with good players that fill roles or play above their salary level, you can win a title, kind of like the Boston Celtics did last season. But you've got to really be smart about building your team, and you have to have that number one guy. That's why the Jazz are going to be bad next year. They are going to try to lose games unless they do something stupid like go trade for Brandon Ingram. That would be ridiculous because there goes your 2 cap spots, and you're done. That's it. Those rumors about Brandon Ingram, I should do a video about it, but I don't think the Jazz are going to do that. I think what they're going to do now that they have a little bit of cap space left, I believe they have some other things like a mid-level exception or whatever those are called, whatever. They are going to probably use that to bring on contracts, potentially bring on more picks. We shall see. But I think this season is basically going to be Lauri and the kids. It's going to be players like Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, Cody Williams, players like that getting a lot of minutes with Lauri Markkanen. Now, the problem is, does that make you win too many games? Can you be a bottom 5 team with Lauri Markkanen? I think you can, but it is dependent on them giving those young players a chance to play. And having Lauri Markkanen on the floor is going to be nice for their development. But the Jazz are walking a tightrope now. It's a tightrope, and it's scary because Lauri Markkanen's really good. He's not going to win you a championship, but he's good enough to get you to the, possibly knock on the door of the play-in like the Jazz have kind of done the last 2 seasons. So Utah has to be careful. That means they've got players they got to look at trading. And that means Danny Ainge might do the things he probably doesn't want to do. And that means trading a player for probably less than he might want. Colin Sexton, if the Jazz are going for a top 5 pick and they want to capture the flag and get Cooper Flag, they have got to trade Colin Sexton. He is too good. 1, because they just can't afford to win too many games. And 2, they need to give those minutes to Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, all these guys that just need minutes, and let those rookies play, lose those games, take their lumps, learn from it so that you get a top 3, top 5 pick. You have to have it. And you don't want to be 7 or 8 going in the lottery. We've already found that out. It's not fun. Last season, Utah goes into it, number 8? They drop 2 spots. You go to 10. You know what happens if you're a top 3 team going in the lottery or top 5? If you drop 2 spots from 3, guess what? You're still getting a number 5 pick, and that still probably gets you Nolan Traore or VJ Edgecombe. And that's a player that you can build around next to Lauri Markkanen and you hope turns into that number 1 guy. And if you get lucky, you can get that Cooper Flag pick or maybe number 2 and get Ace Bailey. And then all of a sudden things look really different for this Jazz team for the future. I've had people, cynical fans on Twitter who don't even watch the Jazz when they start losing and think of everything like college football. This is not college football. There's only 5 players on the court. There's 1 ball. And if you don't have one of those guys that when they have the ball in their hands, they're crushing the opponent, you're going to struggle to win a championship. If you can get Cooper Flag, it changes everything. And so people will say, oh, it's only a 14% chance at getting a number 1 pick. Well, what if you knew that Cooper Flagg was the type of player that could win you a championship? You're basically saying we have a 14% chance at a championship. Wouldn't you want to take that? Right? Wouldn't you want that chance? I would. And then guess what? If you get a Cooper Flagg in the draft next year, you pair them with Lauri Markkanen, all of a sudden, you have quite the makeup of a team. And then if you have Keontae George take a step, Taylor Hendricks take a step, Cody Williams take a step, any of these rookies, if all of a sudden they start developing and turn into something special, then it's even better. Then you've got this team. The other thing to take into account is that Utah is going to be bottom 10 this year, which means that the pick that they still owe to OKC, if they don't convey it this upcoming season, then it goes to OKC in 2026. So if the Utah Jazz are bad in 2026, they have to be bottom 8 in 2026. So Utah is likely going to be bad for the next 2 years, guys. I hate to break it to you. If they win the lottery next year, then they may not care about 2026. They may not care. If you get Cooper Flagg next year, they may not care. And at that point, when you look at this Lauri Markkanen contract, you can see that they'll have cap space. And what's interesting, Keith Smith from Spot Track, who does an incredible job, he mentions that Lauri Markkanen's renegotiation and extension deal with Utah Jazz is fully guaranteed for 5 seasons. Year 3 dips in order to potentially create cap space. The only other salaries on the books for Utah during 2026-27 season, as of now, are rookie scale contracts. That's the team. So it's Lauri and the kids. He is not mentioning veterans. So John Collins, Colin Sexton, who else? All the other veterans. Jordan Clarkson. Those players are going to be moved, or at the very least, not on the team at that point. And Utah has to find a way to get them off the team because you have to give minutes to these young guys. Because if this is the plan, and if you're going to walk this tightrope and you're going to try to maverick this plane through the canyon, you've got to do it the right way. You cannot mess up, okay? Do this right. You have got to get them off the team, let these players develop, because the idea is that in 2 years, if you've got Cooper Flagg, or if you've got Ace Bailey, or if you get AJ DeBonsa, or someone like that in 2026, Cam Boozer, whatever, then these players that are developing now will be ready at that point to really take off, you know? And then at that point, you'll have cap space to re-sign them. You know, what if Keontae George becomes special? You know, he definitely has the potential. He had that game against Golden State where he hits 9 threes. He shows just some incredible passing. He was the most impactful player on the Summer League team again, and he showed some real flashes last year. What if Keontae George takes a leap and becomes something really special? You know, you want that player next year's draft to be on the team. You want Keontae George to be ready, so in 3-4 years, you're kind of ready to go, and that's when you start a really nice window of development. That's the thing, too, about this Lauri Markkanen contract. You know, I have a few worries about his long-term health and if he can hold up, but his style of play does seem to be conducive to a longer career. You know, he's 7 foot, volume three-point shooter. He's mostly a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. In fact, mostly non-existent as a pull-up three-point shooter. And so we'll see over these next 5 years if he can kind of develop that aspect of his game. If he can, it makes him even more valuable. But having him on the team for 5 years, in 2 or 3 years, those are kind of the years that the Jazz might be able to take things to another level. My guess is Danny Ainge really wants to win this lottery next season. And it's going to be Lauri and the kids. We're going to see a Clarkson trade at some point if we can. His value's not super high. We're going to see a Sexton trade at some point. The thing is Utah can't go into the season and win a lot of games. That's why this didn't always make a lot of sense to me, because you just have to get that guy. And Cooper Flagg looks like that guy. And you put like Cooper Flagg next to Lauri Markkanen, and you have Keontae George and Taylor Hendricks and all these players on the wing. All of a sudden things get really exciting. So let's see. Anything else that I got to talk about? I do not think so. I think the Jazz are going to make one of those big-time trades at some point, and so get ready, guys. I want to give a shout-out to the All-Stars. Thank you guys, actually, for just being so supportive of the channel. I took a vacation last week. My goal is to just do a video every day. I know I didn't get one out yesterday. I'll get one out tomorrow as well. But I just want to thank everyone who supports the channel. I'm going to start doing more videos this month and just talk about these different things. Any rumors that come up, I will speak on them. But I appreciate all of you. I had a really brutal work week last week as well. Things were just not fun or happy or good at work, and it was terrible, and it weighed on me for some things that happened that really sucked. But anyways, I'm back, feeling good. I appreciate every one of you. I want to give a shout out to the All-Stars. Let's give a shout out to See Ya, Alexa Later, Bill, Ryan Perry, the legend, Baby Elliot Matson, Nathan Butnett Burkhart, Christian House Money to Haas, The Outlaw, Jesse James Nelson, Ezekiel Raicibe, the man from down under, Built Ford Tough, Alexander Tufts, Jorge Arrizaga, Mimigo de Abajo, Jordan the Goat Best Roll, Austin R. Grant, Editor Extraordinaire, KG10 to TH5, Patrick Kubel, the Connoisseur, and Robert Hall of Fame. Guys, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel, to the podcast. I'll talk to you next time.